in angels. Chapter 5. Second Temple Jewish Angelology. Note: I have opted for angelology to encompass the varied terminology for members of the heavenly host surveyed in chapters 1 and 4. Having discussed that terminology, readers should be aware that angelology is used for convenience. Our survey to this point will lend coherence to Ollian's assessment. The use of the common term angelology by scholars is problematic. It implies a single systematic doctrine of angels, something that may have existed for some specific groups, perhaps the Qumran sectarians, but certainly does not exist in rabbinic texts. Endnote. In her 1926 thesis, Dorothy Leifer stated, "One of the outstanding features of the intertestamental literature is the appearance of a well-developed belief in angels." The statement is accurate, though it reads like a dramatic understatement today, since Leifer did her research over 2 decades before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That material underscores just how much of an obsession angelology became in the Second Temple period. Members of God's heavenly host are mentioned repeatedly in Jewish literature of the Second Temple period. Note: many studies of Second Temple Jewish angelology have demons, or the fallen watchers, in view, not our focus of the loyal members of God's heavenly host. Endnote. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain nearly 170 instances of plural Elim or Elohim and the related phrases B'nai Elim and Elohim. While these figures are nowhere described as Melachim, that term does appear in the plural over 100 times in the Qumran scrolls. The Greek text of the pseudepigrapha references angeloi, angels, 196 times. The same Greek corpus includes egregoros, watcher, 13 times, all in the plural. The Old Testament Apocrypha includes angel 9 times, angels 38 times, and spirits 5 times. In the writings of Josephus, of the 66 occurrences of angelos, 22 of them point to a supernatural being. This sort of frequency indicates a strong interest in the heavenly host. Second Temple literature portrays the abilities and behavior of angels and their service to the Most High in many of the same ways as the Old Testament does. But there are also differences. Both the comparative and contrastive elements in Second Temple portrayals of angels will be our focus in this chapter. Nature and abilities. Second Temple Jewish texts frequently refer to angels as holy ones, no doubt due to their proximity to the presence of God. The description of God's heavenly host as holy ones occurs repeatedly in the Dead Sea Scrolls, 147 times, as well as in Greek texts of the pseudepigrapha, 98 times. Note: the respective terms are kedoshin and hagioi. In Aramaic scrolls, the kedoshin, holy ones, are mentioned 22 times. Endnote. The divinity of angels is also put forth when Second Temple writers utilize ruchot, spirits, 175 times to describe members of the heavenly host. According to Jubilees 2:2, the spirit members of the heavenly host were created on the first day of creation. Note: in contrast, 2 Enoch 29 has them created on the second day. Endnote. Philo famously referred to them as disembodied souls. The Dead Sea Scrolls, 1QHA 9.8-11, declares that God has formed every spirit and created all the hosts of heaven according to your will. The fact that angels are called fallen stars also attests to their divine nature. Note: the stars of heaven are also distinguished from angels in many passages of 1 Enoch. Endnote. Writers of the period leave no doubt as to the lesser status of the members of the supernatural world, holy or fallen, relative to the God of Israel. Citing the texts devoting the most space to angels, 1 Enoch and the Qumran scrolls, Davidson writes, "There is no trace in the Enochic books of a cosmic dualism in which 2 equal or nearly equal heavenly powers are opposed to each other. The Enochic authors give no place to any rival to God. Even though angels are very important, no angel ever challenges God to usurp his authority." This detail is important in light of lengthy academic discussion on the Qumran community's dualism, an easily misunderstood term. In the early stages of the scholarly investigation of the Qumran material, some researchers incorrectly argued that the rule of the community revealed a cosmic dualism in which God had an equal, evil rival. The mistaken idea was based on a portion of 1QS, now referred to as the Two Spirits Discourse. Davidson's words are again appropriate. The Two Spirits Discourse in the rule of the community has occasioned much discussion on this issue, since it involves mutually opposed angels, the Prince of Lights, with whom are associated the Sons of Light, and the Angel of Darkness, with whom are associated the Sons of Darkness, and a contingent of other angels. Given the clear statement that God has made all things and ordained their patterns, it was argued that the Two Spirits Discourse presupposes a cosmic dualism, but not one involving equally or nearly equally matched powers. Nor is the opposition to be described simply in terms of God and an evil angel. The dualism of the discourse is indeed a variety of cosmic dualism, but with God clearly unequaled. Angels, watchers in Enochian terminology, might fall due to a lapse in moral judgment or rebel in concert with their own hubris. 1 Enoch suggests both with respect to forbidden unions with human women before the flood. As such, Second Temple Judaism saw the holy ones as imperfect. That the fallen watchers are punished by God reveals they were considered subject to divine judgment. Members of God's host also were not considered omniscient. When asked about certain events in the distant future, an angel answers the scribe, "Concerning the signs about which you ask me, I can tell you in part, but I was not sent to tell you concerning your life, for I do not know." Second Temple Jewish writers considered angels to be immortal. Indeed, part of the rationale in 1 Enoch for condemning the decision of certain angelic beings to cohabit with human women was that they were immortal beings having no need to perpetuate their kind. The scroll 1QHA 9.13 speaks of the everlasting host of heaven, suggesting that angels will live on indefinitely. However, as Kuhn notes, their immortality was contingent on God's favor. They were considered to be deathless and yet to be capable of annihilation by an intervention of divine judgment. Angels were also intimately connected with natural forces. Jubilees 2, 1-2a is representative. For on the first day he created the heavens which are above, and the earth, and the waters, and all of the spirits which minister before him, the angels of the presence, and the angels of sanctification, and the angels of the spirit of fire, and the angels of the spirit of the winds, and the angels of the spirit of the clouds, and darkness, and snow, and hail, and frost, and the angels of resoundings, and thunder, and lightning, and the angels of the spirits of cold, and heat, and winter, and springtime, and harvest, and summer, and all the spirits of his creatures, which are in heaven and on earth. This selection from the Book of Jubilees associates angels with the behavior of the skies and weather, a thought echoed by 1 Enoch 60, 11-13, and 17-19. Then the other angel who was going with me was showing me the hidden things, what is first and last in heaven, above it, beneath the earth, in the depth, in the extreme ends of the earth, the extent of heaven, the storerooms of the winds, how the winds are divided, how they are weighed, how the winds divide and dissipate, the openings of the winds, each according to the strength of its wind, the power of the light of the moon, and how it is the right amount, the divisions of the stars, each according to its nomenclature and all the subdivisions, the thunders according to the places where they fall, and the subdivisions of the lightnings according to their flashing of light, and the velocity of the obedience of the whole array of them. The frost wind is its own guardian, literally angel, and the hail wind is a kind messenger, literally angel. The snow wind has evacuated its reservoir. It does not exist because of its strength. There is in it only a breeze that ascends from the reservoir like smoke, and its name is frost. And the wind and the mist do not dwell together with them in their reservoirs, but the mist has its own reservoir, for its course is glorious. It has light and darkness both in the rainy season and the dry season, and its reservoir is itself. an angel. This thinking amounts to an extrapolation from the biblical association between angels, sons of God, the stars, and the sky, as well as God's sovereign control over season and weather. As sky beings, angels would naturally be God's agents for such things. Note, though certain Second Temple works deny that the stars were angels, the idea persisted in Judaism into late antiquity. The book of 3rd Enoch, written in Hebrew and composed in the 5th or 6th century A.D., is a good example. In his contribution to Charlesworth's Old Testament pseudepigrapha, Alexander observes that in 3rd Enoch, the stars are clearly regarded as animate beings, like angels, and so can be said to possess spirits. Like angels, they have fiery bodies and are sentient beings. But in 14.4 and 17.6, they appear to be regarded as inert masses of matter that are moved by the angels. End note. Kuhn notes, concerning the function of angels in the natural world, the doctrine is substantially as follows. As spirits of the natural powers, they are thought of in terms of the elements over which they exercised superintendence, the sea, frost, hail, mist, dew, and rain. They attend the sun, direct the lightning, control seasons and years, and direct the course of the vegetative growth on the earth. Note, on the same page, Kuhn adds, the author of Jubilees similarly speaks of the angels of the spirit of fire, and the angels of the spirit of the winds, and the angels of the spirit of the clouds, and of darkness, and of snow, and of hail, and of hoarfrost, and the angels of the voices, and of the thunder, and of the lightning, and of the angels of the spirits of cold and of heat, and of winter, and of spring, and of autumn, and of summer, and of all the spirits of his creatures. End note. For Second Temple Jewish thinkers, angels were supernatural celestial beings, yet their descriptions went beyond those offered in many biblical scenes where angels interact with people. Angels as men. According to 1 Enoch 17:1-2, angels are like flames of fire, but when they desire to do so, they can appear like men, a consistent feature of Second Temple angelology. It is especially prevalent and apparently necessary with respect to interaction with humans. The Book of Tobit, composed in the 3rd century B.C., is a prime example. Tobit sends his son Tobias to find a travel companion for a journey to Media to collect a debt. Tobias meets a man who turns out to be the angel Raphael. Raphael does not reveal his true identity until the end of the book. Note, scholars have noted that the portrayal of Raphael in Tobit depicts a stage in the development of angelic mediation that stands apart from angelic deliverers in previous Jewish texts and can be significantly associated with early Christianity's view of Jesus as a heavenly being who appears as a nondescript Israelite and brings news of hope, healing, and demonic liberation to suffering Israelites. End note. Curiously, Tobit 6:5 suggests that Raphael shared a meal with his human companion, but Raphael attributes the scene to a mere vision in Tobit 12:19. The 1st century A.D. work, Joseph and Asenath, features a heavenly man who is human in form, save that his face was like lightning, and his eyes like sunshine, and the hairs of his head like a flame of fire of a burning torch, and hands and feet like iron shining forth from a fire, and sparks shot forth from his hands and feet. Note, Sullivan notes, most interpreters understand this being as an angel, even though the text does not contain the term angelos. There are good reasons for this interpretation. The being comes originally as a star. Within the passage he is called a man from heaven, who identifies himself as the commander of the whole host of heaven. This title was seen in Joshua 5:13-15, and later attributed to primary angels such as Michael. The imagery of his brilliant face and fiery hands and feet is common to angelophanies. Moreover, Asenath responds by falling to the ground. This is undoubtedly a case where an angel is referred to as a man. End note. The luminescent angel accepts the hospitality of Asenath, but specifically requests a honeycomb as food, which Asenath does not have. The angel instructs Asenath where to find one, but the honeycomb was one made by the bees of paradise from the dew of the roses of life that are in the paradise of God. Note, there are other instances of angels accepting meals of hospitality. In the Testament of Abraham, Michael appears to Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac on more than one occasion. In places, the story is reminiscent of the incident in Genesis 18, save for creating the impression that Michael does not actually eat the meal offered to him. Instead, God sends an all-devouring spirit to consume the food, to feign Michael's own consumption. Such stories undoubtedly have some relationship to Hebrews 13:2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares, though the primary referent is almost certainly Genesis 18. Endnote. The late 1st century Apocalypse of Abraham describes the angel Yahael as coming to the patriarch in the likeness of a man. Yahael appears physically as he takes Abraham by the hand, despite the fact that the patriarch sees a body of spectacular radiance when looking upon the angel. The belief that angels assumed human form, even flesh, was no doubt based on certain Old Testament incidents involving angels where fleshly embodiment is presumed. 1 Enoch 6-16 is an expanded retelling of the incident of Genesis 6:1-4, where the heavenly sons of God produce offspring, Nephilim, with human women. The same physicality is assumed in the Genesis Apocryphon from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Focusing on Josephus, Begg writes in this regard, Josephus' initial mention of angels comes in Antiquity 1.173, where, in line with the Septuagint reading in Genesis 6:2, he alludes to angels of God who generate hybrid beings, giants, with human women. In this instance, Josephus envisages angels as engaging in a very human and physical activity, copulation. Note, Begg goes on to note with curiosity Josephus' reticence to have angels eating. Josephus has the 3 men in the biblical account, Yahweh and 2 angels, only seeming to eat. Begg also cites Josephus' use of the term phantom when describing angels at certain points. This terminology cannot be taken as a denial of angelic physicality in Josephus, for, as Begg's work shows, Josephus interchanges this terminology with angel in his affirmation of Old Testament passages that require physicality. Endnote. Elsewhere, Josephus has angels performing other acts of embodiment, such as fighting and wielding a sword, while remaining capable of ascending unaided to heaven. This is similar to what we see in the Old Testament, yet Second Temple descriptions of angels, even when described as men, are more elaborate. In the Old Testament, it is rare for angels to be visibly distinct from humans. Often, people who encounter such figures have no idea that they are anything but men until some sort of self-revelation. Second Temple texts take more liberty in portraying angels as men with features not common to humans. Naming the angels. One of the more noteworthy innovations in Second Temple Jewish angelology is the naming of angels. In the Bible, Michael and Gabriel are the only holy celestial servants of Yahweh that bear personal names. Note, other divine beings are known via transliterating Hebrew words and recognizing their existence in ancient Near Eastern texts outside the Bible, for example, Satan, Rahab, Leviathan, or by virtue of their being foreign deities, for example, Marduk, Asherah, Baal. These figures are not holy members of Yahweh's heavenly host. They are hostile chaos agents or rival deities. As many Old Testament scholars have noted, the term Satan, translated in English Bibles as Satan, is not a proper personal name by rule of Hebrew grammar. Endnote. This number swells in the Second Temple period. The innovation also operates more widely as groups of angels also receive names. Ollian's observations capture the development. The emergence of angelic names and the designations for angelic divisions poses a problem for historians attempting to understand developing belief, and has been widely noted as a salient characteristic of ancient and medieval Judaism in contrast to Israelite religion. Where pre-exilic and exilic biblical texts suggest a divine realm populated by thousands of unnamed angels praising God and serving Him in war and in judgment, the materials of ancient and medieval Judaism present a very different picture. The angelic host is beyond counting, named, and articulated in detail. The developments include the emergence of named angels, classes of heavenly beings, angelic hierarchy, archangels, a complex of heavenly temples and cults, conflict between good and bad angels, expanding roles of angels in the human sphere, and characterization of angels. In terms of specific names, Barton lists nearly 30 good angels given names in the apocryphal literature. Begg uncovers 5 additional names in his brief discussion of angelology in Pseudo-Philo. As Olian's work demonstrates, there are more, and the number increases after the Second Temple era. The discussion of named angels typically revolves around those heavenly beings identified as archangels, also called watchers, Iren, in 1 Enoch 20, verse 1. Note, this designation is found in the Ethiopian text, "And these are names of the holy angels who watch." The term watcher is usually reserved in Second Temple literature for the divine beings who sinned before the flood, though, as in Daniel 4, it is not exclusive to fallen divine beings. In academic literature, some scholars prefer principal angels over archangels. End note. Second Temple Jewish literature is not consistent with respect to their number. Primary sources might enumerate 4, 6, or 7 archangels. Commenting in 1 Enoch 9-10, Nicholsburg writes, "A complement of 4, and later 7, named archangels, here holy ones, appears first in 1 Enoch 9-10, and then becomes something of a staple in Jewish and Christian literature. Their existence and the number 4 were doubtless inferred from the 4 living creatures in the throne vision of Ezekiel 1-2. The later literature makes an association with Ezekiel 1-2 explicit. In the action of 1 Enoch 9-10, however, the 4 are not placed at the throne. They go forth from heaven, view the world, approach the divine throne with their petition in behalf of humanity, and are then dispatched to the world to act in God's behalf. In 1 Enoch 20-36 and 81, the number 4 is expanded to 7, adding Uriel, Ruel, Remiel to Michael, Sariel, Raphael, and Gabriel, in order to provide a complement of angels who are associated with the places of Enoch's cosmic tour rather than God's throne. Note, the difference in listing is related to the textual situation of 1 Enoch. Aside from a few Aramaic fragments of the book found at Qumran, the book is preserved substantially in Greek, but only in its entirety in Ethiopic. Machalak notes in this regard, "The traditions concerning the numbers of the principal angels differ one from another. The conception of 4 probably preceded the notion of 7 archangels, which is testified to, for example, in 1 Enoch 20, which witnesses a tradition which lists the 7 angels of power, whereas in the Ethiopic text of 1 Enoch we find only 6. The Greek text has Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Serachael, Gabriel, and Remiel. Therefore, the expansion includes Raguel, Remiel, and Serachael. Remiel does not appear in the Ethiopic manuscripts." End note. Why the upsurge in naming angels in this era? What drives the impulse among Second Temple Jewish writers? Several theories have been put forth. In his extended study of the names of angels and angelic brigades, Olian outlines and critiques the approach thus. 1. Foreign influence. Religious ideas outside Judaism provided the catalyst for personalizing angels and making them more prominent. 2. Magical practices. Religious rituals aimed at combating demons or practicing divination were thought to be more potent if named angels were invoked. 3. Transcendence of God. The term transcendence refers to the idea that Jews thought God less accessible, and so angels took on more of a mediating role. Angels in turn became more personalized. 4. Gnostic trajectories. In terms of specific sects and formulations, the Second Temple era is too early to speak of Gnosticism. However, various elements of Gnostic thought were drawn from Jewish mysticism. One such thread was the proliferation of named entities, for example, aeons. 5. Internal Jewish development. By this, scholars point to an apparent evasion of anthropomorphic language for God. One example would be how the Book of Jubilees inserts an angel in the story of the binding and near sacrifice of Isaac in the place of God in the biblical account. Other Second Temple texts similarly relieve God of his role in Old Testament stories. This approach is related to the third option noted above. The approach argues that personal angels replaced God in stories, as God is perceived as being more remote. Olien and I find these suggestions unconvincing, though several of them have some worthwhile insights. Note: briefly, Olien cites H. Ringgren and Gerhard van Rad approvingly when they argue it cannot explain post-exilic developments. These scholars prefer to look to Israelite religion's divine counsel as a better source for the variegated role of angels. Given the biblical emphasis on the divine counsel in the Hebrew Bible as agents of God implementing his will on earth, it is difficult to see the coherence in the notion put forth by many scholars that angelic activity in the Second Temple period indicates God's withdrawal from human affairs. Olien notes that Second Temple Jewish works, such as the Testament of Solomon, known for demonic exorcism ritual magic, is useful for elucidating many of the more obscure angelic names occurring in Hekkalot texts and Jewish theurgical materials from the first millennium CE, but again concludes there are significant aspects of angel names not explained at all by magical practices. With respect to an inaccessible, transcendent God, Olien rightly ponders how many angels are needed to be conduits to God. Second Temple texts reveal there are few angels who perform such a role, most of whom are second power in heaven figures, hypostases. The large number of named angels would therefore be superfluous, and so inaccessibility is not a useful explanation. Olien notes that this view had, by the time of his writing, been widely discredited, both for the anti-Jewish bias underlying the classic formulations and for a lack of supporting evidence. In like manner, Olien notes of the Gnostic option that it may explain some features of angelic beliefs, though this remains unproven. Endnote. Olien views the internal development thesis most favorably, but by this he does not mean misgivings about an anthropomorphic deity. Rather, he discerns an exegetical development, specifically that angel names were the product of creative Jewish exegesis of the biblical text. He writes, "Many names of individual angels, as well as angelic divisions, were the result of biblical exegesis, particularly of theophanic and angelophanic texts and descriptions of the divine counsel. Exegesis is at least a major aspect, if not the most significant component, of the elusive framework sought by scholars in order to better understand the development of ideas about angels in late biblical and post-biblical texts. Many epithets or adjectives describing angels in theophanic, angelophanic settings in the Hebrew Bible became the designations of angelic brigades in some of the more elaborate descriptions of angels." To briefly explain, Olien discovered that common words associated with scenes in God's throne room, or rare words in the same scenes, made confusing by errors in manuscript transmission, were used by Jewish writers to create the names of angelic contingents. Note: Olien provides specific examples. Parts of the throne complex, often rare or unusual words and sometimes opaque in meaning, gave rise to angelic orders. So did words that are otherwise common but are here associated intimately with the throne of God. Corrupt words, which are cruces in theophanic. Angelophanic contexts produced angelic brigades through the process of exegesis. Hapax legomenon, textual corruptions, and obscure and perplexing theophanic angelophanic narrative gave rise to angelic divisions. Hapax legomena are words that occur only once in the biblical text. Endnote. Olien discovered that Second Temple writers used the same technique to manufacture the names of specific angels. After surveying 10 angel names, he observes, "Patterns of exegesis emerge from this survey of 10 angelic personal names. All appear to be of biblical derivation. A number of the names discussed in this chapter appear to have been derived from textual cruces in the Hebrew Bible, some from hapax legomena in particular. Most of these cruces or hapax legomena occur in theophanic, angelophanic, or related settings tied closely to God's activity."